want to welcome members, witnesses, and our guests in the audience to today's hearing. And without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking member. I therefore ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted in accordance with Committee Rule 3.0. Without objection, so ordered. We are here today to hold an oversight hearing titled Advancing Federal Water and Hydropower Development, a Stakeholder Perspective. I now recognize Mrs. Hoyle for her opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to the witnesses who traveled to be here. I look forward to hearing from you about how Congress can help address the challenges that you're facing. I expect that we will hear a lot of bipartisan agreement at this hearing. There's a lot that we can work on together. Communities across the West are facing water challenges. There's not enough of it. Sometimes there's too much in different places. Droughts are getting longer and more severe, snowpacks are getting smaller, and everyone is having to adapt. Hydropower, when done right, is an important part of the balanced energy system. However, the administration and the DOGE effort has been haphazardly gutting federal agencies, so nonpartisan civil servants can't do the work that everyone here agrees that we should do. For example, I was happy to support the generational investments in our Western water infrastructure and drought resilience through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. These laws provided over $15 billion to repair our aging infrastructure and modernize our water systems for the 21st century. That's something that everyone can agree that federal tax dollars should be spent on, infrastructure. That funding has been at work updating our aging systems, supporting tribal water access, and boosting water efficiency and reuse. Despite that progress, the administration has paused key water grants and fired the workers who've helped communities across the West access those funds. This chaos is preventing the federal government from supporting reliable water power deliveries across the West, and also leaving contractors and workers in limbo as they have to stop the work that they were planning to do. At the Bonneville Power Administration and other power marketing administrations, staffing cuts have targeted engineers and operations staffs, the people who keep the lights on. Power marketing administrations provide affordable power across the West at no cost to the taxpayer, so these cuts are not about government efficiency because we as ratepayers pay for them. These cuts are threatening our grid stability, especially in rural communities, like the ones I represent. For example, I heard from constituent that DOGE's mass firing at BPA meant there weren't enough linemen in Central Oregon to repair a high voltage transmission line if it went down. They left us with one. That's not government efficiency. There are real opportunities to improve efficiency in government, but cutting programs and staff across the board without thought or strategy is just creating chaos and hurting our economies. We need well-staffed and well-funded federal agencies to deliver safe, reliable water and electricity, and of course, everyone should want efficient use of those dollars and that work that's done. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses on how we can make that happen. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for a 5-minute opening statement. I want to apologize for being a bit late today. I was at a press conference at the Department of Ag with some important announcements. So again, I am sorry. I know that your time is valuable and we want to be considerate of everyone in the room. Today, the Subcommittee on Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries will hear from stakeholders on how Congress may continue to advance and support federal water resource and infrastructure management and hydropower development. Water is the Interior West's most important resource. In my home state of Wyoming, access to water resources is crucial to our success. Whether water is used for irrigation, recreation, human consumption, manufacturing, or hydropower production. Our rivers, lakes, reservoirs, dams, canals, laterals, siphons, headgates, and tunnels are key to ensuring that we have an adequate water supply to meet the demands and needs of our citizens, ag producers, energy producers, small business owners, and manufacturers that operate across our state. Since its creation in 1902, the Bureau of Reclamation has been the primary agency responsible for the construction and operation of the largest water infrastructure projects in the West, with the North Platte Project and Shoshone Project in Wyoming being the first two permitted and constructed in our country's history. The North Platte Project alone provides municipal water, recreational opportunities, wildlife habitat, irrigates hundreds of thousands of acres in Wyoming and Nebraska, and is responsible for the creation of the Miracle Mile in central Wyoming, the #1 blue ribbon fishery in North America. Without infrastructure such as Pathfinder Dam and Reservoir, Buffalo Bill Dam and Reservoir, the Flaming Gorge Reservoir, Lake Mead and others, and their related infrastructure, many of our western rivers and streams would be dry for a substantial portion of the year, thereby making it impossible to have the abundant wildlife, fisheries, habitat, and recreational opportunities that we all enjoy today. As the largest wholesale supplier of water, Reclamation delivers approximately 10 trillion gallons of water to people across the 17 reclamation states each year. In addition to being a water supplier, many reclamation projects also produce affordable and reliable hydropower. The energy that this infrastructure generates serves as the backbone of our region's energy future, which is another important aspect that we will be examining today. As a litigator, I fought for Wyoming's water rights and represented irrigation districts, municipalities, and farmers for decades. Nearly every major water project has been met with negativity and criticism by naysayers and academics, yet history has shown the tremendous environmental value and economic impact of these projects across the board. As our witnesses will discuss today, we must continue investing in our federal water and hydropower projects and development, continuing to support Reclamation's work, maintaining the infrastructure that we have, and increasing our nation's water storage and conveyance capacity means more food, more energy, and more prosperity for generations to come in Wyoming and across the United States. But we cannot solely rely on the success of those who came before us. Like other hearings we have held at this committee, we need to examine the steps that we need to take to chart a better path forward, one that safeguards the existing infrastructure and projects that Reclamation operates, but also allows for more hydropower production, more storage and conveyance capacity, and greater access to these resources for the communities that depend on them. For one, aging infrastructure is a reality that every Reclamation project is facing. In Wyoming, a few years ago, we had a tunnel collapse that cut off water to tens of thousands of acres of productive farmland during the height of the irrigation season. We must do more to prevent critical failures in our infrastructure, because those failures not only risk industries like farming, but also risk surrounding lands and the lives of our families. We must protect and maintain the infrastructure we have while continuing to build new storage projects. Future generations depend on our investment now. Protecting and maintaining this infrastructure also means examining the various environmental statutes that impact the design, construction, operation, maintenance, and replacement of these projects. Statutes like the Endangered Species Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act have all been weaponized as barriers to the development and maintenance of reclamation projects and water resources. Efforts to reform and modernize these statutes will similarly improve the management of our water resources, thereby providing benefits to every single person in this room, regardless of where you may call home. I lastly want to thank my constituent, Jim Webb, for being here today and for your willingness to testify before this subcommittee. With that, I want to take the time to thank all of our witnesses for being here, and I look forward to a robust conversation. I now recognize Ranking Member Huffman for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad we're having a hearing to talk about the reliability of our water and power systems, especially in the West. If Congress wants to do something about this, and I hope we do on a bipartisan basis, The most important thing is to pick up where we left off 2 Congresses ago. Because I've been in Congress, this is my 13th year, I have heard endless debates and endless politics and political theater over these subjects, but we took action. We made historic investments, and that is enabling us to face some really important realities when it comes to these issues. Climate change is shrinking our snowpack. It is drying up many of our rivers. It's straining our water infrastructure, especially aging infrastructure. And we have to face the reality that we have less water than we would like right now. That's not just because of growing demand. Rising temperatures, shrinking snowpack, shifting precipitation patterns, all of this is cutting into supplies. Around the West, communities are being squeezed harder and harder every year by climate change and prolonged drought. According to Colorado College State of the Rockies poll, 77% of Western voters view climate change as a serious problem. 88% see inadequate water supply as a major concern. But despite these clear mounting challenges, the Trump administration continues to claim that the climate crisis is fake news. And the real kicker is that they are not just denying this reality, they're actively working to make the crisis worse, including dismantling the very agencies that deliver water and power to millions of Americans. And under the guise of efficiency, of course, we know Elon and the Doge folks have been pushing massive indiscriminate layoffs, gutting the Bureau of Reclamation and the Power Marketing Administrations. Thousands of positions, engineers, dam operators, hydrologists, emergency operators, critical positions have been eliminated or left vacant, and these are literally the people who keep our taps running and the lights on for tens of millions of Americans. And we're already seeing the consequences. Lost institutional knowledge, fraying relationships with local agencies, critically important water resilience projects delayed or canceled, decades-old federal-local partnerships eroding before our eyes. And the stakes are equally high with our energy grid. Indiscriminate cuts at the Department of Power's, at the Energy Department's Power Marketing Administrations, including Bonneville and Western, are putting grid reliability at risk, raising real concerns about blackouts and system stability across the West. Now, I don't know about you, but firing workers, rehiring them, and then maybe firing them again is not exactly a good plan for stability. It is volatile enough just trying to manage water and power resources. It is a high-wire act on the good days when you add in all of that chaos. And think about what that does to your goal of having a skilled professional workforce. It is a recipe for terrible morale, for vacancies that can cripple an agency's effectiveness, and ultimately for failure. President Trump wants to dismantle the federal workforce, and then we get to the next shoe that will drop, to replace them, these experienced public servants, replace them with political loyalists. So let me be clear. Our federal workforce should reflect competence and dedication to public service, not just yes men for Donald Trump and his billionaire friends. All of our government should reflect those values, but especially in the areas of water and power. Look, the bottom line is this administration's actions show a dangerous failure to understand the complexity of our nation's water and power systems, especially in the West. Reliable infrastructure, strong working relationships. These things don't happen by accident. They require long-term investments in a professional, mission-driven workforce, not the hollowed-out shell that this administration seems to be creating. And let's remember that the entire scheme of this federal workforce purge is overseen by a guy at the Office of Management and Budget who says on the record that he wants every federal employee to feel traumatized, to feel miserable coming into work every day. That is a recipe for disaster across government, but especially when it comes to the water and power agencies that we're discussing here today. We need to do better. With that, I yield back.
I will now introduce our panel of witnesses. Mr. Jim Webb, President and CEO at Lower Valley Energy in Afton, Wyoming. Ms. Michelle Bushman, Deputy Director and General Counsel at Western States Water Council in Murray, Utah. Mr. Jonathan Haswell, Chief Business Officer at OceanWell, LLC in Woodside, California. And Mr. Patrick Sigl, Director of Water and Natural Resource Law at Salt River Project in Phoenix, Arizona. Let me remind the witnesses that under committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. To begin your testimony, please press the button on the microphones, and we use timing lights. When you begin, the light will turn green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow, and at the end of 5 minutes, the light will turn red, and I will ask you to please complete your statement. I will also allow all witnesses to testify before member questioning. I now recognize Mr. Webb for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Hageman, Ranking Member Hoyle, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. This is exciting. My name is Jim Webb, and I serve as the President and CEO of Lower Valley Energy, a not-for-profit cooperative serving western Wyoming and southern Idaho, southeastern Idaho. I am here today to highlight the importance of the Columbia River system and the Bonneville Power Administration, not just to my community, but to the entire Western grid. Hydropower is America's oldest and largest renewable resource, providing nearly 30% of all renewable generation. It is uniquely dispatchable, carbon-free, affordable, and essential to maintaining grid reliability. At Lower Valley Energy, about 85% of our power supply comes from hydropower, including 2 low-impact facilities that we operate. We are also exploring the opportunity to install a 3rd system on an existing federal dam that does not have generation now. One of hydropower's greatest strengths is its operational flexibility. Hydro plants can quickly ramp up or down, provide critical grid services like frequency regulation, and have black start capabilities, meaning that they can restore power independently after a major outage. As we integrate more variable resources like wind and solar, while demand continues to soar for electricity, hydropower's role as a flexible backbone becomes even more critical. The Bonneville Power Administration is critical to our success. BPA markets power from 31 federal hydro projects and operates a vast network of over 15,000 miles of transmission lines. Ratepayers cover BPA's operating costs, capital investments, and environmental responsibilities through its power and transmission sales revenues. Stated more plainly, BPA ratepayers, not taxpayers as was already mentioned, fund its workforce and programs without burdening the federal budget. Because of this self-pay structure, staffing reductions at BPA and other PMAs do not yield federal taxpayer savings. Instead, they impact BPA's ability to provide reliable service, maintain grid infrastructure, implement fish and wildlife mitigation programs, and carry out their public mission. I do express concern over the December 14, 2023 MOU between the federal government, non-governmental organizations, and the 6 sovereigns, which paves the way for breaching of the 4 lower Snake River dams. This agreement was reached largely behind doors without meaningful input from public power utilities, agricultural communities, or many tribes. Breaching these dams would have severe consequences. They provide around 3,000 megawatts of clean, flexible, and affordable power and support several thousand megawatts of wind and solar generation. Removing them would compromise grid reliability, increase energy prices, and place additional strain on already congested transmission corridors. The previous Trump administration completed a resource-intensive environmental impact statement and NOAA biological opinion on the Snake River dams in 2020. These studies concluded that dam breaching is not a viable option. A more recent NOAA Fisheries rebuilding report ignores prior NOAA science, making a 180-degree turn largely to presume breaching the Snake River dams is the only viable path to rebuilding salmon populations without scientifically reliable data or analysis to back up its claims. In my opinion, we don't need to open the EIS and do more studies trying to come up with different results to fit somebody else's narrative. We fully support fish and wildlife recovery. Approximately 25% of our monthly bills that we pay to BPA goes to support fish mitigation. Our investments are yielding great returns. Recent data shows that salmon returns have actually increased threefold since the first dams were built. We are doing our part. Now, let's focus on other causes of salmon decline, such as ocean conditions, habitat, predators, and climate change. In closing, I urge Congress to protect the Columbia River system, ensure BPA has the tools to succeed, and keep energy affordable and reliable for millions of Americans. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. I now recognize Ms. Bushman for 5 minutes.
Chairman Hageman and Ranking Member Hoyle, the Western States Water Council is a bipartisan government entity created by the Western governors. Our mission is to ensure that the West has an adequate, secure, and sustainable supply of water of suitable quality to meet its diverse economic and environmental needs now and in the future. The Council has long supported federal actions to authorize hydropower projects that enhance our electric generation capacity while appropriately protecting environmental resources and respecting states' Clean Water Act Section 401 certification authority, as well as states' authority over water allocation, the obligations of interstate compacts, and the rights and preferences of existing water and power users. The potential exists for further development of hydropower, including upgrading existing generators, developing small hydro, and the power potential from low-head hydro on existing man-made conduits and canals, and development of tidal power energy systems. Such development on existing infrastructure can often be undertaken with little impact on environmental and ecological resources. Permitting requirements may be appropriately minimized and streamlined to promote reasonable development while avoiding unnecessary costs. Water is often a necessary component of energy development and production, which can present significant challenges in states where water resources are already scarce. Similarly, water management can be energy intensive, including desalination, recycling, and reuse of water resources. An integrated approach to water and energy is necessary to achieve a thriving and sustainable future for the West. The West depends on an intricate system of infrastructure financed and maintained under a complex network of state, tribal, local, private, and federal ownership. Federal dams, operated and maintained by the Bureau of Reclamation, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, have largely exceeded their design life, with an estimated $50 billion in needed repairs. The Council supports federal actions to provide stable and continuous funding streams and coordination of state and federal efforts to strengthen existing dam safety programs. Many of our rural communities are struggling to meet existing and future water supply needs. These small systems, serving under 10,000 people, face limited technical expertise, sometimes contaminated water supplies, and lack of access to alternative water supplies. Regionalization of shareable technical, financial, and managerial resources across multiple small systems may present opportunities for small systems to make meaningful improvements. The Council supports the use of the Bureau of Reclamation's Rural Water Program to identify smaller-scale opportunities for small public water supply systems. Under the Reclamation Act of 1902, the Reclamation Fund was envisioned as the principal means for financing future federal Western water and power projects with revenues from Western resources. The unobligated balance of the Reclamation Fund continues to grow and is expected to exceed $25 billion. However, the fund receipts are mostly spent elsewhere, contrary to Congress's original intent. The Council recommends that Congress investigate the advantages of converting the Reclamation Fund from a special account to a true revolving trust fund with annual receipts to be appropriated for authorized purposes in the year following their deposit. The Council has long supported the negotiated resolution of Indian water rights claims, which can achieve the final determination of unquantified reserved water rights for tribes in a manner that is least disruptive to existing non-tribal water uses with younger priority dates. This leads to greater water security across the West and an increased ability to plan for the future. These settlements have a regional impact and are not and should not be considered earmarks or community projects. The Council urges Congress to expand opportunities to provide funding for negotiated settlements and to ensure that authorized settlements will be funded. Finally, sound decision-making for water resource management requires accurate and timely data on precipitation, soil moisture, snow water content, droughts, and more. Water, droughts, and wildfires do not stop at state or tribal borders. Federal data at regional scales forms an integral component of our capacity to make meaningful and nuanced decisions about limited water resources. Recent federal layoffs, massive staff reductions, and the closure of local federal agency offices across the West have created uncertainty about the future of federal support for water management and related disaster mitigation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Bushman. I now recognize Mr. Haswell for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Hageman, Ranking Member Hoyle, and members of the committee. On behalf of OceanWell, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to discuss advancing water development. My name is Jonathan Haswell, and I serve as Chief Operating Officer of OceanWell, a water technology company that was born and bred in California and whose goal is tackling global water scarcity through a novel offshore deep ocean desalination system. I'm here today because our innovation offers a scalable, sustainable way to strengthen U.S. water resilience and presents a modular, fast-to-deploy alternative to traditional resource-intensive infrastructure projects. In short, technology can and must be part of the modern water scarcity toolkit. Producing abundant, affordable, environmentally friendly water at scale is now within reach. And perhaps most importantly, with OceanWell, one community's water security no longer must come at another community's expense. Guilt-free water at large scale is now possible. The challenge of water scarcity is not new, and neither are the limitations of traditional solutions. Traditional forms of desalination have been deployed internationally to bridge water gaps, but at a steep cost. High energy consumption, intensive chemical pretreatment, marine life mortality, massive land requirements, and the challenge of managing brine discharges. These economic and environmental burdens have historically limited desalination's use within the United States. OceanWell was founded to fundamentally rethink desalination and specifically solve for these cost and impact challenges. Like onshore desalination, OceanWell proposes to use reverse osmosis technology to separate salts from seawater. However, rather than operating from the shore, we relocate the process to the deep ocean, approximately 1,500 feet below the surface, where naturally occurring hydrostatic pressure provides the force needed to drive reverse osmosis without energy. In this aphotic zone of the ocean, where less than 1% of sunlight penetrates, the water is colder, cleaner, and near limitless. As a result, we eliminate the need for chemical pretreatment and avoid the energy costs associated with pumping and pressurization onshore. OceanWell's modular subsea pods each produce 1 million gallons per day of fresh, potable supply and are engineered for a 30-year lifespan. This approach delivers water with dramatically lower energy consumption, no marine life mortality, no need for large onshore treatment plants, and a minimal brine discharge impact. OceanWell's modular nature allows for quick capacity growth to address the needs of an expanding community. By shifting where and how desalination occurs, OceanWell offers a scalable, energy-efficient, and responsible solution. Recognizing the need to support water-scarce communities in the United States, OceanWell is planning to deploy its first water farm in Southern California and is projected to deliver approximately 50 million gallons per day of fresh water to the region. To advance this effort, we have established a work group of 26 California water agencies led by Los Virgenes Municipal Water District. Water is foundational to every aspect of America's economy and national security. Yet, unlike energy or transportation, it is often taken for granted. Most people rarely think about where their water comes from until it is not there. Water security is economic security. It is national security, and it demands the same urgency and innovation we apply to every other critical infrastructure need and challenge. A reliable water supply directly strengthens a community's ability to prosper. Moreover, safeguarding water supply strengthens national security by protecting military bases, ports, and disaster-prone regions. Every storm, wildfire, and flood elevates the vulnerability of land-based water infrastructure. OceanWell's subsea water farms operate below the surface and have a critical layer of protection. Water resources have historically been overlooked for investment compared to other essential utilities. We are proud to collaborate with public partners such as Los Virgenes Municipal Water District, as well as the Bureau of Reclamation and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We're also fortunate to work with private partners like Kubota Corporation and to participate in Imagine H2O's Global Innovation Ecosystem and the X Prize Water Scarcity Challenge, initiatives that recognize and accelerate high-potential solutions for global water supply and resilience. Layering public and private investment is critical to developing, advancing, and deploying next-generation water technologies at scale. Congress plays an essential role in this effort by incentivizing the development and adoption of innovative water technologies and by strengthening support for public-private partnerships that can deliver resilient new supplies. OceanWell will continue to work with our public and private partners, and together we can create an affordable, abundant, reliable source of fresh, guilt-free water. Thank you again for having me today and for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Haswell. Very interesting. I've actually been talking about this for quite some time. It is imperative that we increase the water supply in California, and I think that this has great promise. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I now recognize Mr. Sigl for 5 minutes. Am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much and good morning. Chair Hageman, Ranking Member Hoyle, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Patrick Sigl, and I'm the Director of Water and Natural Resources Law at the Salt River Project. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today to provide SRP's perspective on advancing federal water and hydropower development. SRP is responsible for the care, operation, and maintenance of the Salt River Federal Reclamation Project in central Arizona, one of the nation's first reclamation projects built under the Reclamation Act of 1902. SRP has a 120-year history of collaborating with the United States and regional partners to develop reliable and affordable water and power resources for our growing communities in the desert Southwest. Our accomplishments over the years are the legacy of the early visionaries, including President Theodore Roosevelt and congressional leaders who championed the passage of the Reclamation Act for the purpose of developing communities and economies in the western United States. SRP was formed in 1903 by a group of farmers who put their land up for collateral to contract with the United States to pay back the cost of the construction of Roosevelt Dam. Shortly after the United States finished building Roosevelt Dam, Secretary of the Interior Franklin Lane turned over operations to these local farmers. Secretary Lane was a visionary who recognized the value of delegating management decisions and operations to local interests who are most familiar with on-the-ground project conditions. He also provided the association with the financial resources through the power revenues to get the job done. Currently, SRP manages 7 dams and reservoirs which can store approximately 2.3 million acre-feet of water. SRP is the largest raw water provider in the Phoenix metropolitan area, delivering about 800,000 acre-feet annually to our shareholders and contractors. SRP is the largest not-for-profit, community-based public power provider in the country with a nameplate generation capacity of approximately 15,000 megawatts, including a portfolio of sources including hydropower, natural gas, baseload coal, nuclear, geothermal, solar, wind, and batteries, serving electricity to nearly 3 million people. The project was built to address water and power challenges in the extreme desert environment, where precipitation can vary from year to year and summer temperatures often exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The next 100 years are expected to bring even greater demands for water and power to the valley. SRP, through continued collaboration with the United States and regional partners, is developing multiple additions to the reclamation project to meet these challenges for the next century. I'd like to highlight a couple of those projects for you today. First, on the power side, our increased energy demand is driven in part by rapid expansion of large energy customers such as data centers and advanced manufacturing facilities. SRP is exploring opportunities to use pumped storage hydropower to make intermittent and low-cost renewable resources such as solar more reliable. The project would act as a large battery and allow SRP to use power generation during the day to pump water to the upper reservoir and then release the water in the afternoon and evenings to generate hydropower to meet peak loads. SRP is uniquely situated with the topography and water supply to support the project. The resource could provide up to 2,000 megawatts of power for 10 hours, enough for up to 500,000 homes. On the water supply side, over the next 100 years, the Verde River watershed is expected to experience increased precipitation variability, resulting in less frequent but greater inflows into Bartlett and Horseshoe reservoirs. Currently, these reservoirs lack the capacity to fully capture flood flows off the watershed, in part due to the loss of about 50,000 acre-feet of storage capacity due to sediment accumulation since they were built in the 1930s and 1940s. In response, SRP Reclamation and a group of 23 water providers are partnering to complete a federal feasibility study to analyze options to address these challenges. Through the Verde Reservoir's Sediment Mitigation Project, the partners are studying the feasibility of, among other options, enlarging Bartlett Dam and Reservoir, which could more than double existing capacity, adding 350,000 acre-feet of storage capacity, enough to support 1 million American homes. In conclusion, SRP has a long history of collaborating with the United States and regional partners to develop reliable and affordable water and power resources to serve our growing communities in the desert Southwest. Such collaboration has produced numerous accomplishments over the decades. The support of Congress, federal agencies, and regional partners will be key to meeting the challenges of the next century and to continue to fulfill the aspirations of the early visionaries of the reclamation program to build strong and resilient communities. Thank you, Chair Hageman, Ranking Member Hoyle, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. I would encourage you to look at the Pathfinder enlargement that was done several years ago in order to reclaim the capacity lost to sedimentation there. I believe it was 56,000 acre feet that was reclaimed just by increasing the height of that dam. So there's definitely some other projects out there where that has worked. I want to thank all of the witnesses for your testimony, and I will now recognize members for 5 minutes each for questioning. I'm going to begin with myself. Mr. Webb, as you can imagine, I want to talk to you about what's going on in our area. And in your testimony, you highlighted the importance of the Columbia River system as an energy source in the Pacific Northwest. One specific issue you raised is the debate around the lower Snake River dams. Last Congress, many of our members were involved in oversight efforts to push back on the Biden administration's efforts to undermine this important resource. What can Congress do as we move forward to ensure that these dams are protected?
Thank you, Chair. And Congress is the key. You guys hold the keys to whether or not dams are removed. You authorize dams being put in. So nothing can be done unless it's authorized by Congress. So our hope is that Congress will be on our side and we won't tear out dams. It's critical that we hang together and we do that. We can support salmon, and that's very important to me, but we can also have the dams and electricity, and both can coexist.
You know, I would imagine that Spain, Portugal, and France really wish they had the hydropower backup right now in light of what's been demonstrated this week with the fallacy of wind and solar. So I agree with you about the importance of these resources. You also referenced the 2020 biological opinion that was completed in President Trump's first term, which concluded that breaching these 4 dams was not an option and noted that the dams are managed to benefit fish populations in the basin. Can you share your perspective on how this existing infrastructure and salmon populations can coexist?
They can, and a lot is done to protect the salmon. The most important probably is the flow regime. So water is released, or we call it spill, to allow the small smolt to get down the river and make the trip quicker and a higher survival. Technology is used for weirs and for the blades to make them more fish-friendly. Ladders are there, so significant investment's been made to protect the salmon, and like I mentioned, the runs, especially this last year, are threefold what they were before the dam. So we're having success. There's more we need to do, but we also need to focus on the non-dam related issues with salmon, like the predators, like the ocean conditions. And so there's a lot that we need to look to, but we're very committed to protect the salmon. That's very important to us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webb. And Mr. Haswell, I was fascinated to look at the information that you are providing. I think that this has great promise to be able to meet the demand of the state of California. California has the same water infrastructure in place today with 40 million people as it had in the 1960s with 16 million people. It's clear that the leadership out there has failed to provide the water infrastructure necessary to meet the demand of those citizens. And we know that demand for water and power resources is expected to surge in the coming years. In fact, we demand more electricity every day than we did the day before. We need more energy every single day than we needed the day before. And we know that there are new technologies and new approaches that are available, and they are going to be key to meeting that demand. Can you talk about the opportunity that new technologies like OceanWell can help increase water reliability across the West?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. OceanWell is able to generate a new source supply that comes from the ocean, comes from regions not currently tapped, and which avoid a lot of the challenges of drought resilience, and the other hazards that prevent existing supplies. Its modular, scalable nature also means that we can expand the volume and production that comes from a water farm, as we describe it, as demands prevail and increase for those given communities.
Are you doing a pilot project right now?
We're doing a pilot project in Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, actually in an inland body of water in their reservoir. And the reason for that is simply that water is dirtier, and so a more taxing test on our intake systems and our self-cleaning systems.
I'd love to come and visit that. I'd like to see that.
We would love to host you.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your testimony that Congress could further support public-private partnerships like yours by streamlining the federal permitting processes. Can you expand on the importance of permitting reform to solving some of these issues?
Absolutely. We have permitting experts within our organization. I'd love to have them supplement our testimony to speak specifically to that. But as a general point, ensuring any programs that envisage traditional desalination also envisage and factor for new technologies, and specifically deep ocean desalination would be enormously helpful for our ability to bring this technology on stream and provide new supplies.
Well, I'm out of time for my questioning. We definitely will follow up in terms of working with you on this permitting reform. It's a priority of Chairman Westerman's. It's a priority of many of the people on this committee. I think it's critical to the future of being able to provide water and energy to the citizens of this country. So thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Huffman for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the fact that several of our witnesses got us into a really interesting conversation about innovation and how that can lead us forward in places like California especially. Appreciated the witness from Salt River talking about the pump storage and other innovative strategies you've been pursuing and your leadership there. And, you know, we've got some things that we can disagree about, Lower Snake River and other matters. But I want to talk with you, Mr. Haswell, about this intriguing technology that you're working on, because I've been working on desalination and the challenges to cost-effective, scalable desal for a long time, going back to my time in the California legislature. And I remember many years ago working with Long Beach on using maybe offshore drilling platforms, especially as they were decommissioned, but you know, as the infrastructure for something exactly like what you're talking about, going down far enough that the hydrostatic pressure would solve the energy challenge of desal, 40% of the cost. That would be fantastic if we could do that at scale. And the technology that you showed us and talked about, you know, seems pretty exciting, but I've seen so many of these things come and go and never quite, you know, make it out of the valley of death. Tell me why yours might be an exception to that. And I noted in your testimony that public-private partnerships, including with Las Virgenes and some of the others you've mentioned, but also the Bureau of Reclamation and some grant funding from the federal government, which I presume came from the historic Western water infrastructure investments we put in place a few years ago. Talk about why that's really important for your ability to make it out of the valley of death.
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. In one word, collaboration. We recognize the technical challenges, which over the last 7 years we've worked pretty hard to solve for, to answer the challenges of conventional desalination. But we've also engaged all stakeholders very early on. About 4 years ago, we started a fairly extensive outreach program to surface any questions, challenges, or issues of deploying this technology. And so far, we have been met with a generally positive response that this solves the needs that conventional desalination may not always meet, and so is a viable new pathway.
Does your technology use like abandoned rigs or things like that, or do you have your own standalone infrastructure?
So the intention is to build our own standalone infrastructure in what we describe as a water farm. There is a possibility to use pre-existing infrastructure, especially insofar as there may be pre-existing shore crossings or subsea electrical systems that are already at distance to depth. Those we look at on a case-by-case basis.
Could you use offshore wind infrastructure, for example?
Potentially, the ability to
You've got
co-locate.
floating on the West Coast, I know, so it's complicated.
Yeah, there's a technical challenge in that windmills or turbines are at the surface. We are 1,500 feet below, so you need a dynamic umbilical, but it's solvable by engineering. So conceivably, yes.
1,500 feet is the point at which you've got the hydrostatic pressure you need for RO?
That's correct.
Yeah. And how about your, I assume it's a very low volume intake, so entrainment and impingement would not be an issue with your?
Correct. We have an entire subsystem which makes up a large amount of our intellectual property, which is labeled a life-safe cross-flow intake, which is tasked entirely with bringing in water without damage to the marine environment.
Have you done any studies on sort of the outfall side? At the top, it looked like in your technology, and the
brine outfall?
brine concentration.
The design of the system has been informed by what we call low recovery brine outfall targets. So a conventional desalination system will target a recovery rate of fresh potable water at 50%. Ours is 15%, and the reason for that is because we exist where we do in the deep ocean, we have unlimited free source water and pressure.
Yeah.
So we don't need to optimize for recovery rates. We can optimize for minimal brine impact. And so our outfall is a slightly a benign brine in essence.
Super interesting. I would love to learn more about it, and appreciate your testimony. Yield back.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, and the chair now recognizes Mr. McClintock for 5 minutes of
Thank you, Madam
questioning.
Chairman. In 1959, the California legislature passed the Burns-Porter Act. It included a water bond of $1.75 billion. Inflation adjusted, that would be about $19 billion in today's dollars. And with that, we built 10 storage dams, 11 auxiliary dams that store 7 million acre-feet of water and generate 3,000 megawatts of electricity. And with what was left over, we built the entire California aqueduct. Now, since 2000, California voters have approved not $19 billion of water bonds, but $37 billion of water bonds, all promising to enhance California's water supply. And yet, not a single major reservoir of over 1 million acre-feet has been constructed in California, one of the most water-abundant regions of our country, now suffers from chronic water shortages even in years of record rainfall. In fact, water bonds approved by voters with the promise they'd be used for new water storage have instead been used to tear down existing dams. Now, I listened to the ranking member's comments about the need to invest in bureaucracy. Not once did he mention the need to build new reservoirs and aqueducts because, of course, he and his cohorts have blocked their construction in California for decades. Merely completing the Shasta Dam would mean another 9 million acre-feet of water storage. Completion of the abandoned Auburn Dam would mean another 2.3 million acre-feet of water storage, 800 megawatts of hydroelectric power, 400-year flood protection for the Sacramento Delta, and a major new recreational lake serving the entire region. But the ranking member has instead proposed withdrawing federal authorization for that dam. Now, you add the sites, Temperance Flats, Los Vaqueros, that would add several million acre-feet more of additional water storage. In the case of Temperance Flats, additional flood control that is desperately needed for the Central Valley. Mr. Webb, isn't it obvious that our now chronic water shortages in the West are not because of a shortage of water or a shortage of money or a shortage of dam sites? So what is the problem?
Well, thank you. And I think it's a matter of being innovative and making the right investments. Everything we do has an environmental impact, but we have to balance that with making new investments. We've been, in our small cooperative, we've tried to do things. We put in our own facility on a dam that was existing on a creek, and we produce power there now. We're actively trying to, on another federal dam, install hydroelectric there, but I think it's a matter of investment, being innovative.
But investment that makes sense.
Yes.
That actually stores additional water. Mr. Sigl, what are your thoughts? Is this a shortage of money, dam sites, or water, or is it a shortage of political will to build the kind of projects that we rely upon still today for our water supply?
No, thank you for the question. And, you know, the Salt River Project, we've been developing infrastructure and water for 120 years in hydropower, and it has been a commitment of both the federal government, the Salt River Project is the local operator, and various regional partners all along the way. So I think you're right, the making those common sense investments, having the will to proceed with them, analyzing the environmental risks that go with them in the modern era, are very important for all of us to collaborate as we meet these challenges in the future.
Ultimately, doesn't this come down to a question of abundance and shortage, and that the politicians who have had their way over our water policy for the last generation have deliberately chosen shortage?
Again, I think there's different perspectives in different regions that you look at. I know from the Salt River Project's perspective, we've been able to develop the infrastructure over the years, and as I highlighted in my testimony, we're working on raising Bartlett Dam.
You haven't had to deal with the kind of lunacy in public policy that we just heard from the ranking member. Do you think it would be helpful to streamline the process for new dam construction, put the Bureau of Reclamation in charge of all federal permitting agencies, require the permitting process to run concurrently, not consecutively, and put a 2-year time limit on that process?
Yeah, if you're referring to some of the amendments in the Fiscal Responsibility Act to NEPA, yes, we were very supportive of those. We've got several NEPA processes that we're embarking on. Typically, on our reclamation project, Reclamation is the lead agency, and I think some of those streamlining effects will be very helpful as we proceed with our
I
projects.
see my time's expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClintock. And the chair now recognizes Ms. Hoyle, the ranking member, for 5 minutes of questioning.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Mr. Sigl, I was very happy to hear you talk about the opportunities that we have with pump storage for energy production. Our local and international plumber and pipe fitters unions are really leaning in on this. These are good jobs. It is clean energy, and it is, again, the type of public-private partnership that and innovation that we should be investing in. So thank you for that. For Ms. Bushman, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Power Marketing Administrations, and NOAA are essential for providing water to communities, keeping the power grid reliable, and forecasting weather conditions across the West, which are critical for our farmers, for our fishermen, and certainly for wildfire management. How have staffing and funding instability affected their ability to deliver on these vital services from your perspective? And what long-term challenges could these disruptions create for maintaining critical public services across the West? I know what I've heard in my town halls from my local fishermen and foresters and tribes, but from your perspective.
Thank you. Our states are still at the beginning of this experience, so I think that as the experience goes on, that the problems are going to be compounded. Initially, a lot of these programs and offices are run on shoestring budgets as it is. A lot of them are understaffed. And reducing the staffing, closing the local offices is going to decrease their ability to engage with the states and provide the data that is needed in order to make decisions, both in terms of seasonal droughts as well as disaster responses for wildfires and other issues.
Yeah, the biggest thing we're concerned about is about disaster response. And again, our fishermen put their lives on the line when they go out. And if they don't have access to what kind of weather is going to be happening, people die, and we feed the world from the West Coast. Our fishermen feed the world, and we need to do whatever we can to get them the data to be safe. Mr. Webb, you talked about BPA, and as we both pointed out, BPA is funded by ratepayers. Now, I know what we have seen in Oregon, literally leaving us with one lineman in Central Oregon who would not be able to handle any kind of a disaster or down power line, because you need two linemen for that type of energy. And again, you cannot say that this is about government efficiency or saving taxpayer dollars, because we pay for that as ratepayers. So what have you seen with cuts to BPA staffing, and what do you think the effects of that are going to be long-term?
I personally had a project that I've been working on to partner with BPA that would save BPA about $300 million a year. The key staff that was working with me, top staff, they took the early retirement, basically put my project on hold or possibly killed it. And we were trying to partner to save BPA money and reduce their cost and better serve us. So just an example of we need the employees there, we need their staff, and it's critical to what they do for us.
And again, this does nothing to bring down the national debt, because this is not taxpayer dollars, it's ratepayer dollars. And in your case, it actually will cost our ratepayers more, correct?
That would be correct if my project would have been able to be built.
Right, then it would have saved.
It would have saved money.
Ratepayer dollars.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think, we should all want government efficiency, and anyone that thinks that there aren't savings or efficiencies to have in government isn't paying attention. However, when we make these across-the-board cuts and gut agencies without looking at which staff are actually critical, when we stop projects right in the middle of them happening, when we're making cuts that really don't make any sense for what DOGE is supposed to be doing, there's got to be a different agenda or just utter incompetence. But either way, I'm glad that you spoke up, and it should be a bipartisan issue, because our rural communities are affected most, to ensure that we ratepayers have, again, government investment and operations that work for all the ratepayers across all of these states. And thank you.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Bentz for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Webb, the remarks you were making about the Snake River dams are of great interest to me, and so perhaps you can share with everyone you made reference to NIMF's report, which appears to be made up of whole cloth and ignoring the 5-year exercise and putting together the BIOP that emerged not long ago. Can you share with us your thoughts on where that standard that's in that NIMS document, the so-called abundant fish standard, I guess you'd call it, any idea where that came from and what it was based upon?
Thank you, sir. I'm just a lowly cooperative manager, but in my opinion, it was just on both sides. We seems like we try to find the science that tells us what we want to hear, not just be independent and give the truth. So I think it's searching to answer questions and keep looking until you get the answer you want, I guess, would be my opinion.
It seemed to me that in preparing for the hearing that this committee held up in Kennewick, I think we had some 400 or 500 people attend, and all of them, it appeared to me, were opposed to removing the dams and opposed to the types of structure that were being debated. One of the concepts that came up in a memo, I'm not sure how valid it is, was that the dams wouldn't be removed; they would simply be regulated out of power generation. Is that rumor still floating about, that under a federal judge might say, you don't have to take the dams out because that would require, Congress, but if we just make it that you have to let the water run through the dams, we can do that administratively. Is that concept still out there?
That's still out there, and that is one of our worries. We don't want to make them uneconomical or unusable. So that's still out there, and hopefully that won't happen.
One of the concepts that came up with a biologist that has studied the river for many, many years was that there's about 50% mortality in the fish making their way from the top of the drainages down to the ocean. And then when the 50% that remained went into the ocean, about 1% came back. And so the question in my mind had been, well, why in the world aren't we focusing on what's going on in the ocean to try to figure out how to further reduce mortality? Because my understanding is that the billions, literally, of dollars that we put into those dams have reduced dramatically the impact they've had upon the movement of fish. We were using, or I think he was using, a river up in Canada which has no dams on it, and it too had the 50% mortality on the way to the ocean. Your thoughts on that? What have you guys done, if anything, to try to, as I have done, because I've met personally with NIMS and said, you need to start focusing on the ocean. What do you folks think should be done in that space?
Yes, I think on the rivers, we've done everything we can. We've invested, like I said, 25% of our monthly bill goes to fish mitigation. I agree with you that the focus needs to be on the ocean, the conditions there, on the predators that eat the fish coming in and out of the ocean into the river, and we need to focus there. And so we need to really study what's causing the decline in the ocean, and that's where the losses are.
And we should go back again. The thought had been if you could reduce the loss before the fish get to the ocean from 50% to let's say 40%, that would still mean you'd still get like 1% back. So it just seemed to make so little sense for us to continue to throw those billions of dollars into reforming or refitting or doing whatever with dams or tearing dams out and throwing them away, when in point of fact, you're not going to improve significantly the returns of fish. Why is this argument so panned by environmental organizations?
I don't know. It seems to me we should all work together, focus on the big threats, which would be the ocean, and try to find solutions to that. I would agree with you.
Yeah, we all agree, but thank goodness at this particular point, my understanding is that steps are being taken to reverse some of the steps that were being taken to spend another $500 million on various alternative power generation. And that in anticipation of removing the dams, I'm hopeful that's going to go away and we can shift our investments to a more productive purpose. But thank you all for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Gray from California.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for your participation here today. Some of my colleagues have spoken about the landmark legislation that provided millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, frankly, for water infrastructure and storage. In the San Joaquin Valley, which I represent in the heartland of California and the largest agricultural valley in the world, we specifically have a $500 million allocation for San Luis Reservoir, which is currently, I think, paused by the Trump administration. Hopefully, we're going to see some change there and be able to move forward with both upgrading the facility there and new construction. There are opportunities up and down the valley in California to develop additional water and power projects necessary to increase drought resilience and meet growing demand for power across my district, affordable clean power, by the way, that we should develop a lot more of on the West Coast. You know, this includes some investments in major traditional above-ground storage like Sites Reservoir, which is a product of the bipartisan water bond that we did when I was in the state legislature. I was a co-author of the effort, and will be the first major reservoir built in California in a half century. The federal government has a responsibility, and I want to underscore that, in helping to fund these type of projects. And I think some of the efforts back here in Washington to cap the federal cost share and the other things that have gone on are inappropriate. We probably need to look at those and re-examine them, and I would hope that my colleagues across the aisle would join me in those efforts. But I welcome and support efforts that would bring us new water and hydropower development. But it's also crucial that we make sure that protecting existing projects that can continue to deliver both affordable water but also energy. And My understanding is in the next 10 years, we're going to see nearly 300 hydropower projects that will need relicensing by FERC, and those projects will expire. I continue to hear constantly about hydropower projects being held up by federal agencies, imposing fish passage and species protections, as well as in some cases using these bureaucratic process to leverage more water out of the existing systems in tandem with state regulation. This causes hydropower owners and their electric customers to address issues way beyond the actual effects of the project, both increases the cost of energy, but also limits the availability of water, which is critical when you're feeding the world out of California. 2/3 of the fresh fruits and vegetables come out of our valley. We do more dairy in one county of the 5 counties I represent than entire states in this country. So for those that don't appreciate the magnitude and the scope of California agriculture, this is absolutely a critical issue. So, Mr. Webb, what impacts can regulatory uncertainty have on production and management of hydropower facilities, and what actions could this committee take to streamline these processes and avoid these inappropriate, two bites at the apple opportunities that state agencies as well as federal agencies are taking on these facilities as it relates to both water and power?
Thank you, sir, for the question. And I'm involved in a relicense project right now for a small project that we built in 1942. I wasn't there, but in 1942, and this is our 3rd license. It takes about 5 years. And each time there's things added, like you mentioned, that devalue the project. We're asked to do things that don't actually have anything to do with the project. We're required to do expensive studies that, on a small project, that's a big bite, really adds to the cost. So I think streamlining things, if we could be more focused on the impacts of that project and not other things in the surrounding area, looking at it as a deep pocket that, hey, if you're going to relicense this, we want you to do these other things. I think it needs to be focused on the project and streamlined, and it's very lengthy and it's very costly.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Madam Chair, I hope to work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find solutions that bring certainty to the operators during this process, and ultimately delivering water and generating hydropower. We need to find these workable solutions with the federal agencies and stop this double dipping and really streamline the process. So appreciate the time today. I want to close by just saying both the Tuolumne River and the Merced River in my district are currently engaged in discussions with the state of California trying to determine, trying to find a path forward through a negotiated process on water. And what's happening with these hydropower projects is having a really detrimental effect to the availability of water to the farms that really need it. So appreciate the committee's consideration in this hearing today, and I'll yield back the rest of my time.
Well, I appreciate that. We have a couple of other folks who are trying to get here. We've got a lot of committee hearings and markups going on today, which is why you're seeing people come in and out. There's a couple of points that I think are well worth making in light of our discussion and in light of the importance of this issue. Mr. Gray, I want to thank you for your comments and your efforts to try to streamline this. It sounds to me, Mr. Webb, like with these agencies, they are attempting to impose. Oh, we're going to do a second round of questioning just because we're waiting for the next folks to come in here. So, Mr. Gray, you'll have an opportunity if you want to after I have taken my time here. It seems to me, Mr. Webb, that these agencies are attempting to impose what I would describe as unconstitutional conditions. In other words, they cannot prevent you, or they cannot condition approval of a permit or a project based upon requiring you to do something that is unrelated to that project or that is not part of the necessity of that project. So I would encourage you to look into that. I also cannot understand why existing projects are not already considered part of the baseline, and why every 5 to 10 years or 25 years we're having to go back in and entirely redo our permitting process. That makes absolutely no sense to me. A good friend of mine who used to be on this committee from California, John, used to say that we could be either champions of abundance or lords of scarcity. I'm tired of the lords of scarcity. I'm tired of the people who believe that we have to try to find some way to prevent us from building, operating, and using these resources that we have. And that's why it was important to have all of you in here today. Mr. Sigl, in your testimony, you talked about the importance of the timeliness of these environmental reviews and efficient permitting. Do you have any thoughts on specific steps that Congress could take to improve the federal permitting process? And I'm going to ask every one of you that same question.
No, thank you very much for the question, Chair. And, we've been operating the reclamation project over many, many years prior to the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, and Clean Water Act, and we, have adapted to that under the Endangered Species Act in particular. We've sought out incidental take permits and habitat conservation plans for our operations. There's plenty of opportunity, I think, to streamline the regulatory process and developing and operating these projects. And, we want to work closely with anybody, including you and this committee, to help work through those.
Well, if you have those ideas, we'd ask you to get them to us because we're very interested. Ms. Bushman, what could we do? What are your ideas for streamlining the permitting process so we can actually build hard infrastructure? I'm not talking about endless studies. I'm not talking about going out and studying the smelt for the 17,000th time. I'm talking about what do we do to streamline the permitting process so we can build infrastructure to meet the demands of the citizens of this country.
One thing we can do is have our federal agencies work closely together with our state agencies so that environmental review that is required on both sides can happen at the same time and be coordinated. That doesn't always work because they have different requirements. Sometimes state legislatures have required certain things, and the federal agencies have to meet certain federal mandates as well. But to the extent that we can coordinate those so that you only have to do the same environmental review once, and do it early, coordinate early rather than having states tacked on as an afterthought would streamline that and speed up that process significantly.
I like that idea. Don't you agree that California needs to build additional water infrastructure to meet the demands of its citizens and agriculture?
Yes, we are dealing with less water, and when water comes, it comes with more intensity, and the only way to manage that in the West is with greater
I'd look at the hydrology.
infrastructure.
I don't think we're dealing with less water. I think we're dealing with people who are we've had an obstruction for so long to building infrastructure that we're making a lot of excuses for this, but we need to build the infrastructure to meet these demands. Don't you agree?
Agreed.
Okay, Mr. Webb, what do you think we could do to streamline this process?
Well, in my perspective is obviously from a small project to small projects, but it seems like if we knew ahead of time what the clear requirements were, but it seems like personal agendas and mission creep come into play, and so it's kind of a moving target. So from my perspective on our small projects, being very clear up front what's required would help us.
Okay. Well, are they still on the way? I think that they should be here any minute. Mr. Gray, if you have additional questioning, why don't we go ahead and go with you?
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to pick up where I left off, talking about the Tuolumne River specifically. And I'm going to highlight this because we can have real win-win situations when federal agencies work constructively with operators. And in the case of the Tuolumne River, the Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service during their FERC relicensing process to develop a plan accelerating $80 million in habitat and other improvements that will benefit wildlife species and ensure that Don Pedro Reservoir can continue to deliver reliable water and power supply. We have other examples with floodplain restoration projects in California. We did about 50 million of those projects in the last 5 years out of the state legislature. Of course, I'm going to underscore again the point, Madam Chair, that the federal government could pick up the tab on a major investment in that space as well. And I think if we take an all-of-the-above approach, we could actually really move the needle on the available water in California for both habitat and for farming and communities. But I want to open the question up again on how do we ensure federal agencies work with operators so existing hydropower infrastructure can continue to operate? And I heard a comment that the coordination between the state and the federal agencies could be improved or could be an opportunity, but it also can be a hindrance because in some cases, these agencies are using duplicative process to get two bites at the apple for, more water out of a certain project, or making the voluntary agreement or the negotiated agreement unattainable. So certainly want to hear how we ensure the federal agencies work with the operators and with locals, but we avoid these duplicative, requirements, I guess. What can the federal government do to ensure that we don't have that situation?
Is that for me?
It certainly can be.
Okay.
That's an all-takers question.
I would say that there is room for improvement on both the federal and the state side. I think that often the states are tacked on as an afterthought, and then they have to do their environmental reviews that are required by their state legislatures. In doing that, some of that does become duplicative, and it doesn't have to be that way. That is going to require some federalism engagement. That means the state agencies and the federal agencies are going to have to work together and improve that process. So there is that room for improvement. We haven't really engaged in that up to this point. So encouraging that, and Congress may have a role in encouraging that opportunity, but also ensuring that the environmental reviews that we're doing are relevant to the projects that need to be done.
I'd certainly like to see Congress encourage that, and I'll cite one other example, somewhat unrelated but related. Different states categorize hydroelectricity as clean and renewable power, and other states don't. And there might be a role for some federal leadership, Madam Chair, in trying to establish that as a federal goal across the board in all states, because I think these projects are invaluable both for the cheap and affordable energy as well as the important delivery of our water resources. Yield back my time.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Crank for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I had to preside over the House, and as usual, they have us doing 40 things here at one time. Water infrastructure maintained by reclamation and local operators, from storage facilities to canals to hydropower, provides critical benefit to all types of water users, from agriculture, municipalities, and recreation. And for example, reclamation is the second largest producer of hydroelectric power in the country, owning 77 facilities and directly operating 53 of them. And that generates 15,000 megawatts of power that benefit Coloradans and others across the West. Of course, aging infrastructure is a growing challenge for communities, and many of these assets are now well beyond their original life expectancy. The 2024 State of the Infrastructure Report from the Army Corps and Reclamation found, quote, dams built over 50 years ago are operating at reduced capacity to comply with current safety design and construction standards, unquote. And then also water, the report says water storage capacity in some reservoirs has decreased due to sediment accumulation, reducing both water supply and power generation. Pipes that have been in service for 25 to 60 years are starting to fail. And we've gone from decades of build, build, build to decades of maintain, maintain, maintain. And now we're at a turning point, and Congress needs to begin planning how to replace aging infrastructure efficiently and responsibly. But here's the problem. Dumping billions of dollars into reclamation or other agencies alone isn't enough, because projects still face slow, outdated, and often duplicative federal permitting processes. Streamlining permitting is key. It's not just about faster projects. It's about unleashing not only American energy, but American infrastructure. And I want to thank the chairwoman for making the point on how important permitting reform really is. In your testimony, you noted that SRP's integrated system plan anticipates significant load growth on the grid in the coming decade, with a record peak last August of 8,200 megawatts. We also know that energy demand is projected to surge across the U.S. in the years ahead. Given this outlook, how important is it that we continue investing in hydropower, including the upgrades SRP is pursuing? Mr. Sigl.
No, thank you for the question, Congressman. As you noted, our integrated system plan projected various load growths that we could anticipate and it seems like what we're experiencing is the highest load growth in our service area. Hydropower is very important. As I noted in my testimony, we were talking about a pump storage project to make some renewable sources more reliable. I think everybody on the planet has to look at what resources that they have available and develop them as fully as possible to meet their purposes. And that's an opportunity for us. We also have sort of an all-of-the-above approach to meeting our electricity demand, even increasing from a pipeline capacity to support some of the natural gas plants that we're going to need in the future is also important for us. But hydropower is an important component. And interestingly, it was what got us in the power business in the first place. The original Roosevelt Dam had hydropower generators on it. And then we constructed 3 additional dams for the purpose of producing more hydropower on the project. And that was our early experience, and now we're going back to it. It's almost like we're going full circle to develop more hydropower on the Salt River project.
Well, thank you. And as this committee continues examining aging infrastructure and water issues across the West, I want to point out the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee already operates on a 2-year cycle to authorize Army Corps projects. And it's time that this committee explores a more regular, predictable path for authorizing reclamation projects so we can begin to address this backlog in needs for Western communities. And finally, I would just say, Colorado's in kind of a unique place, my home state. We don't have rivers that flow into Colorado. All of our rivers flow out of Colorado. So if we don't build storage, we're in particularly tough shape. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Soto for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you so much. With extreme weather, it really makes some of this stuff tricky. We, on the East Coast in Florida, have hurricanes, but even a drought right now. Hopefully not for long. We're getting into our rain season in Florida, but we even see up the East Coast drought conditions in what's otherwise a very ample water supply area. We saw in the Infrastructure Act, as well as in the IRA, there was $15 billion in Western water funding to help improve supply, even as we're working on trying to maintain hydropower as a critical part of our renewable portfolio. Ms. Bushman, how do you think it's going so far with the $15 billion allocation and the work being done out west?
I can't speak to that directly because I don't know where each and every one of those dollars is going. But I do know that there have been improvements in the recent past to our infrastructure, but there is a long way to go. Just with the federal dams alone, there's $50 billion worth of safety needs that need to be addressed. And that $15 billion is a small drop in that bucket, but it is significant and it is helpful. And we do need that infrastructure in order to manage our water in the West.
Now, we see a possibility of the funds being rescinded through a reconciliation package coming up. What do you think that would mean for Western water supply?
The need still exists. It doesn't go away.
I wanted to pose a question to the whole council. We're seeing tariffs now in place that are affecting a lot of equipment, both in telecommunications, the hearing I was just at, and in electrical equipment. It'd be great to hear from each of you how, whether it's affecting you all or not, or what do you expect over the next couple of months. And we'll start with Mr. Webb, Mr. Haswell, then Ms. Sigl.
Yeah, well, we've seen the lead time on a lot of our equipment, transformers, wire, other things, has been pushed out a little bit. So we have to do a little bit better planning to, when we're looking at projects, to make sure the equipment is going to be here on time. And so I think it does make the supply chain a little bit stretched. But yeah, that would just be my perspective.
Sure, Mr. Haswell, what are you seeing as lead?
So far, no direct impacts. We have sufficient time in our construction roadmap to adjust, but there may be impacts for subsea electrical systems, but that's the only area on our horizon right now.
Okay. Mr. Sigl?
Yeah, the projects that I mentioned that we're working on developing, they're still in the development stage, so we haven't really gotten into the supply chain aspect yet.
My next question is, we see, as negative growth this first quarter, unfortunately, something we're hoping to see turn around. But if not, we could be in a recession over the next 3 months. It'd be great to know, are you seeing any pullback in investment? We'll start with Mr. Webb, and then we'll go across again. Are you seeing any pullback, Mr. Webb, in capital, access to capital?
In our area, and we're a small electric cooperative and natural gas cooperative, and we have not seen a pullback, and our area continues to grow, and so we haven't seen the impact.
Ms. Bushman, have you seen in your area any pullback in investment so far?
I don't know about pullback in investments, but there are matching programs that are state and federal, and the state matches there, and the federal has been pulling back in terms of grants or financing, other forms of financial assistance. And so that money is still there waiting, and the projects have been postponed until that funding appears again.
Mr. Haswell, have you seen any difference in access to capital lately?
Zero at this point. The capital that we access, certainly in the private sector, tends to think in decades. So, the quarter-to-quarter fluctuations have no impact.
Okay. And Mr. Sigl?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank the witnesses for your valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask for you to respond to those in writing. And as I indicated a moment ago, if you have ideas in which we can streamline permitting, please provide those to the committee so that we can start acting upon them. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. Eastern on Monday, May 5th.
Sorry.
The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.